Call to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Kristen Schweikhofer,
Present?
Robin Grosshus. Here. Jerry Schulte,
Here.
Angela Rasmussen. Here. Timothy Durham,
Here.
Lisa Stoutler,
Here.
and roll call is complete.
Excellent. Next up is approval of the agenda. The agenda is before you.
I move that we approve it.
Go ahead.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes. Let's see, the minutes are attached, and they are from May 9th.
I move to approve the minutes from May 9th.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Minutes are approved. All right, next up, we're flying through public commentary. Is there any public commentary beyond the public hearing for 718 Tappan Street? Because you'll have time under that. See no one rush to the podium. We will move on to the public hearings. Next up is the public hearing 17-0882 for HBA 17-004, 718 Tappan Street variance continuation. And I think we got a few items just moments ago on this. Jan, I know you're in the audience. Do you want to present that, or certainly if there's others that want to speak?
Hello again, I'm Jan Culbertson, and I'm an architect, but also treasurer of the Iota House Corporation. And joining me here in the audience, I have our house director, chapter advisor, we have our chapter president, the collegiate chapter president, our member development chair, who's also a collegiate member, alumni chapter president, and 3 Iota House Corps members, just so you have an idea of the. And as we talked about last time, there are really 2 organizations that work. One is the Iota House Corporation, which owns the chapter house, and then the chapter which leases the chapter house and is in charge of the operations. And both get impacted by the facility. In addressing some of the discussion and questions that came up last time, I'm not sure if all of you were able to download and look at the spherical photographs. It's very hard to photograph those dormers, and I thought maybe those would at least give you an idea. The 3 dormers were set up different ways. Dormer 1 was set up as if 8 women would be living in it. They would be live-in. And Jeff was actually able to see that when he came in for a reinspection. But in laying out the furniture and so forth, it really became apparent that we don't have closet space. It's very difficult to get wardrobes in that space to accommodate that many women. And then also we extend the concern that with the fire escape, you can't lock it, so there's no security. And the concern about cords and just items strewn all over the floor, not making it clear to the fire escape, which is our second legal means of egress for the house. And that affects 2 of those dormers. The other dormers we set up with 14 beds and 12 beds, because I know part of the concern from last time is if we are to consider it, what is the right number that you would want to consider? And I've given you, first of all, little sketches that show the 3 dormers with those 14-bed option, a 12-bed option, and going down to a 10-bed option. So you can get an idea. In the 14-bed option, there's a minimum of 3 feet between each of those beds, and the aisle spaces are mostly about 44 inches. Some of them, when you go, the 1 dormer 2, when you go out the door, that's about 3'4". So you can get an idea of how much just additional open space happens as you reduce the number of bunks. One consideration that we have is just monitoring that space. As there's open space that opens up in rooms, somehow it tends to get filled, and we feel it's really important that personal items stay out of these dormers, as they are the means of egress for the house, dormers 1 and dormers 2 in particular. The other thing affecting the sort of the square footage was looking at other references that might have dormitory spaces. Life Safety does describe a dormitory, but it really doesn't give square footages. And most dormitories are more thinking of college dormitory rooms. But I did find the reference that I had initially was the State of Michigan Camp Licensing Rules, which is 30 square feet. I have found a hostile kind of association that if you join, you have to have 44 square foot minimum per bunk. That seemed rather tight. The fire station design requires 60 square feet, but they also, you have to have separate lockers and storage. And in our particular situation, we don't have, you can't bring any personal items beyond kind of your phone and into the dormers. There was also agricultural housing where they did 40 square feet per bunk, but it also required some personal storage for people because that's sort of where they have their sleeping and they keep their clothes. Almost all of them noted that there needed to be a minimum of 3 feet between bunks. And so that's sort of a little bit of a collection. Perhaps some of you were able to do some research too. One of the other concerns that was expressed was the idea of setting a precedent. And I sort of wanted to address that. And I think there's a good way to be able to clarify what we're doing, and that is specifically state that this is for dormitory-style sleeping only, and no personal items are in those rooms. That makes it a very specific criteria for granting the variance. Also, a precedent would say someone else could take advantage of it and maybe be able to fit more people in. And if you look at, you could also set a criteria that we have at least a minimum of 40 square feet assigned in a day room to each person. So if you look at the requirement, if we keep the 30 square feet for the dormer and add 40 square feet per person in a day room, it's actually 70 square feet. And in the chart in the letter that I sent earlier, it sort of says your code minimum for a double would be 130. If you add the 30 and 40, which is 70 square foot per person, taking the dormer square footage and your day room square footage, you actually have more square foot than you would in a typical double, and it just increases for the triple and the quad. What that really means is people are living and sleeping in more square footage than they would if it were just the code, your ordinance minimum. And that leads me to this chart that I handed out, which talks about our house capacity based on those options. And if we have no variance and we have 8 people living in those dormers, we have a house capacity, not including the house director, of 63. And then each of the other dormer options is basically 56, 58, and 60 if we do some kind of minor renovation, which includes removing closets, so some of the rooms are adequate for live-in doubles. What that says is if you grant this variance, we're actually reducing the capacity of the house in a sense. With the way that we would like to use it. And we think it's a better living situation for the chapter. In discussing the options with the chapter, they have indicated that 8 people living in those spaces would be untenable, and in fact, they would refuse to do it. It just isn't fair that 24 people in the house would have to live with 7 other people, while other people have singles or doubles. The inequity doesn't make sense. And if we take that many people out of it, there's a total loss of about $213,000 to the chapter and Iota House Corporation. So there are some significant financial impacts, as well as we did some research with the other houses. There is one other sorority house that has a room, it's a suite actually with 6. That suite has large closets, wardrobe closets for the women, and they have their own kind of suite bathroom. But that's only one out of all the sororities. So it would really put us having to impose 8 people living in one room. Really, the chapter doesn't want to do it. It isn't something that exists on campus. It's a life safety hazard. And we think that we'd really like to, focus on this and hopefully come up with a compromise that allows you to feel comfortable with the number of women that we have just sleeping in those dormers, and that allows us to maintain the tradition that we've had for 80 years in that house. And we have no issue with improving the situation. Even 14 in each of the dormers is a reduction from what we've currently been doing, and we still intend to, in the 2 older dormers that don't have as many windows, to go ahead and install the mechanical ventilation, so we're sure to have good air quality in those dormers. Those were some of the major points that I wanted to hit, and we're here for, if you have questions of the chapter members or the chapter advisor.
In the
Yes.
one sorority that has 6 people in a suite, do you know what their square footage is?
I don't know what their square footage is. I don't know if Jeff's been there yet.
I have not been to one of those, no.
Yeah, I know that there've been, several sororities that have been adjusting numbers based on square footages. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to ask one more
Yeah.
question. So it's my understanding that the ventilation is going to be changed or fixed in all 3 of the, or was that 2 of them?
It was 2.
Two
The
of
one
them, right?
dormer has 6 windows, which is for, if you look at the number of windows and the number of people, you can get the amount of ventilation with those windows. The 2 older dormers, it's 1 and 2. One doesn't meet the ventilation requirements with 8 people in it. So we're going to the mechanical code, which would be 15 CFMs per person.
So when you modify that, then it would meet the qualification for ventilation for how many people in those rooms?
14.
For 14.
Actually,
Okay.
it has a capacity for more than that, but that's the smallest
Okay.
unit they have.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think at the last meeting, I did pass, if somebody didn't get one, I do have sort of our engineer's sketch for doing that.
All right, are there other questions or discussion items?
I have a question. Is there carbon monoxide monitoring in all those rooms? I don't know if that's a code requirement, maybe to Jeff or to James.
It is not a rental housing requirement.
Okay.
It's not a rental?
It is not, it would be, if they had renovations done to the structure, a building permit was pulled, then they would require for the areas that were occupied as sleeping areas that were under a building permit. They would be required to put in a carbon monoxide detector.
And that is how we how we plan to control with the new mechanical systems, the outside air too. So,
It circulates outside.
yeah, because sometimes, most of the day, there's no one in there. But you want to make sure you have adequate ventilation when people are sleeping.
And your fire alarm system, I didn't get to take the tour unfortunately, is
Yeah.
that to a central panel? And do you get trouble alarms?
Yes, and it's monitored. And we do have fire suppression
Right.
and a
right.
PA-13R.
Hey Jeff, what was the secondary means of egress for dormer 3?
Each floor has a main protected staircase as well as a fire escape. So if the, and I can't recall
So
dormer
that's
3, if the fire
considered-
escape's not there, I think it's in dormer 2 on that floor.
Right, there are
You're
two,
only required to
so,
have one fire, 2 means egress off each floor.
Oh, okay.
So because there's 2 dormers on that floor, the fire escape's only in one of the 2 dormers. I believe it's the way that one's set up.
correct.
So you were good with dormer 3?
As far as egress, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, egress was never an issue. The fire alarm system or suppression or maintenance, I know we've had other entities before this board where maintenance of those conditions were an issue. That is not the issue here. It's a well-maintained property.
Jeff, how about in terms of egress widths and, egress out of those spaces? I presume that's all adequate.
All that the housing code requires is a 27-inch
Okay.
width for corridors. It's far below. So any of those scenarios that the owner has proposed would meet our egress requirements.
And the day use rooms, it's typically, it's one bed, and the intent is for somebody sick or visiting?
Yeah, they're day beds, and yes, the sort of policy, house policy is if you are sick, you sleep in your day bed. Mhm. And each day room has one day bed, and they get a dresser, a desk, and a closet, basically are the provided furnishings.
I think just to follow up on that, what if 2 people in one room are sick, or if there's like an outbreak situation? Do you know how that's typically handled in maybe the house?
Thankfully, we haven't had that situation, but I know in the past, we had before I came, we had a serious outbreak, and actually
there.
one dormer was set up.
Okay, kind of like a
and
sick bed.
everybody who was sick slept in that one dormer,
Okay,
and that was how it was handled in the past. But if we have 2 girls down with the flu or something, we would probably bring one downstairs and sleep them in what we call our green room. It can be used as a bedroom, it has an attached bathroom, and then
Okay.
one could stay upstairs in their day room.
And that's our, quote, guest room, because sometimes we have national officers that come and visit, and we're required to have that. And we actually added that smoke detector in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we were thinking about kind of
The public
All-
health aspects?
all the possibilities.
Yeah.
And you have group living situations, regardless of square footage, sometimes norovirus happens, so.
Yes, that's exactly what we had.
I was out there on a Friday night at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, yeah. It's not ideal,
No.
but it happens.
Hopefully that's not when you did the tour.
Oh,
We have a cleaning service that comes 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So they take care of all of the common areas and bathrooms, and then after a child is ill,
Mhm.
I guess I shouldn't. I'm sorry. Sorry.
A resident.
We redo the room area too, so that we're very good about door handles and all of that stuff.
Jeff, a question for you, and I know the code does not allow splitting space between 2 rooms, but if we were to consider that, is there a way to kind of codify or in their agreement to limit the number of people sleeping in a day room to 1 person?
Well, the day room, depending on it's under the, once it's a sleeping area, it doesn't matter what you could call it, you could call it a dungeon, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it's a sleeping area, the same square footage would apply. It's a rooming unit, sleeping area, it would still be the 80 and 50, so those same requirements would apply.
Right, I understand, but if we were going to go along with the notion of splitting sleeping areas, under the notion that you have the aggregate of these 2 rooms meets code, which I know is a problem, you wouldn't want a situation where you said, okay, it's fine to have 14 beds in here, and then later we decide to add, 80 square foot for the first bed plus 50 square foot for the other beds in another space.
The issue comes up where it's almost like we're starting to double count those day rooms, where you've got the 14, 16, 17, however many beds in the dormer. And then you're using a series of day rooms and saying, well, we're splitting, well, we got beds in there, so people can sleep in there, but we're taking away the number here and putting it here, but
I understand.
the number's still not reduced here. There's still a number of beds here. They still have visitors that come and sleep in those areas. I mean, those beds aren't only used exclusively for those 14 ladies.
Actually, there aren't, I mean, visitors don't stay in rooms. I mean.
Oh, that was what you had just said about that the day rooms sometimes were used for visitors. That's where I got that from. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, they don't, there isn't sleeping in the day room, sorry. I didn't mean to imply that.
So typically, a day room in a fraternity or sorority or one of the Greek buildings, it's a day room. They play games, cards, whatever. Do other, of course they study, yes, I forgot that part. It's used as an additional living space. It's not a sleeping area. Basically, what you're saying is, we've got this sleeping area, and then we got another sleeping area here that we want to use, but this is already accounted for in the numbers. And then the issue, and this is something I brought up from the very beginning, it's not, and Jan reiterated here, it's not a matter of them not having the capacity in that building. The capacity is in that building for, I think you said 60 was your number that you wanted to.
Yeah,
you wanted to
60
have.
is-
They have
I
capacity for
understand,
more
right.
than 60 now. It's more of a, I don't know, lifestyle where they don't want to use that room, if they use those day rooms exclusively for sleeping, and then they might even be able to get away with not even 8 people in that room. Maybe they will only need to put 7 in that room. So that makes it a little bit better. And then, you know, like Jan said, I was able to look at the furniture arrangements. They had one of the dorms set up when I was there for my reinspection a month or so ago. And one of the things I noted was that if bunk beds are acceptable, now, when I was in college, granted, that was a long time ago, we did lofts. We had the bed, and then underneath we had dresser and a desk. That's just the way, and that could easily be set up in that way. Because I think the way that you had it was you had like the beds, and then you had desk aligned in a big, in the middle of the room, which kind of wasn't the ideal layout. Of course, I don't see things the way architects see them, so. But I think in a loft situation where you had the bed on top, and that would save you a lot of give you an extra, you know, third more of space. So I don't think it's quite as draconian as it might be let out to be.
I think what would be, I mean, just a counterpoint to that is, in the university, most of the dormers that allow loft sleeping, and this is loft where you can actually get under your bed, not, you know, like dressers or something under your bed, they require, I think, 10-foot ceilings in
Yeah, exactly.
in
It was a
certain-
long time ago.
So
There
it's
was a lot
only,
less rules
yeah,
when
it's
I went to
only, and
college,
we only
so.
have 8-foot ceilings in our, or 8, they might be 8.1 or something, in the dormers. So, you know, upping the, being able to use that space underneath and make it walkable is a little different. I know you wanted to say.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm the chapter president. I just wanted to mention some, because I lived there last year and I'm living in the house next year too, and I also slept in the dormers. I wanted to mention from my personal experience the positives that I saw from the dormers, and then the potential or the definite negatives that I would see if there were 8 girls living in them. So I had my roommate Emily. She's very energetic, would wake up 7 a.m., go running, went to bed 10 p.m., and I, on the other hand, will sleep in as long as I possibly can and go to bed at 2 a.m. studying. So for us, we had our double where we have our day bed, and that's where our clothes and dressers are and stuff, and then we would sleep in the dormers, and that for me was life-changing because I was able to have my room and I didn't need to worry about turning the lights off when she went to bed. That's the main thing that I thought was so important about it, was because there was always this one space. I had girls who would, my friends would come home from class at 2 p.m. and would just be exhausted after an exam or something, and there was always that dark, quiet, air-conditioned place for them to go take a nap or just, hang out in there. And then I personally think that if the situation were to change and there was 8 girls living in this, from my aspect, and I've talked to all the other chapter members, like during chapter meetings and stuff, just like mental health wise, if I had to personally live with 8 other girls who were always had so many different schedules, like people play sports, people are on debate teams, like the amount of activities that we all do and the diversity of our schedules is completely hectic. So living with 8 girls where the lights would be on and off and people would be blow drying their hair and putting on makeup and clothes would be everywhere, I personally cannot imagine having to do that, especially the safety aspect as well with not being able to lock those rooms. I would feel so uncomfortable with, first of all, sharing a space with 8 other people that would have access to everything, and then all the other house members and anyone who comes in, you know, the cleaning staff, like anyone can come in because the rooms are not locked. For my case, when I lived in a double, we had our room key, and if we wanted to leave for the weekend or for the day, like that room was locked, and I knew I had like the peace of mind that there was always that my space, and it was shared with, you know, 1 or 2 other people. With, if you're living in a double or triple or quad, just living with 8 people I just found it like chaotic and very like stressful to think about. I don't know if you guys had any questions that you wanted, because I just lived there. Yeah.
How many times last year did you sleep in your day room?
I would say maybe once, if that. And that was just because I was like,
Is that typical of the average person that lives there?
yeah, I would think, because everyone, I know it's going to sound like cliche, but everyone literally loved the dormers because the day rooms were often, you know, messy and like where your clothes are. The dormers are your bed's here, your phone charger's there, you go to sleep. And so the day room is kind of like, you know, where your life is. So I think I slept in my day bed one time. Honestly, it was because all of my sisters were out of town and I felt alone because no one was there in the dormers. And so I just like slept there once. And yeah, I think that is typical of all the other girls in the house. If someone was coughing all night, then you have the day room as an option, so you're not waking people up. But yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if I can address the board. I'm very conflicted about this one. I think the code, I think Jeff, by the way, you know, interpreted the code properly, and you know, this was brought through the right process. Yeah, I'm conflicted by, on the one hand, you've got an operation that's worked well for this group. My concerns are obviously the code, which are code minimums, are intended, you know, one of the primary intents is life safety. And I try and contemplate the different potentially perils that could result as having so many students in one room. The room has a fire suppression system, which is not necessarily interpreted by the housing code or even the building code in an R2 case. So I think of, you know, in terms of fire, you know, having a modern fire alarm system and fire suppression is certainly a benefit. I would be worried about carbon monoxide, you know, maybe if we contemplated this going to something, you know, beyond code, because, you know, carbon monoxide overtaking 14 people versus 6 or so in a room would be something I'd be concerned about. The health aspect of having everyone together could probably be debated either way. As far as precedent, you know, I wouldn't, you know, having the house having operated like this for years, I don't necessarily think the board would be setting a precedent by allowing something like this for new construction anyways, or for, you know, a change of use. But, you know, again, I do worry that there's some other safety consideration that you know, we're not thinking through here. But, and that's why I asked too, in terms of, I wouldn't want to see, by allowing this, the overall occupancy in the house being able to be increased in these day rooms where then they could meet, you know, the code required minimums. And I know that's not the current intent, but, you know, that's something I wouldn't want to see be able to happen either, where, you know, these day rooms then could house 4, 5, 6 students. And I appreciate all the operational considerations. Sounds like the house is very well operated, but I don't think the board wants to rely completely on operations, because that can change over time too. And if you have a messy operation, I don't know that it gives Jeff any requirement to go in there and change a variance. So put that out there for any other discussion.
So would we be able to restrict the maximum number of people sleeping in the house while at the same time sort of being loose about where they sleep?
Wherever they sleep is a sleeping area, so your variance would be a variance from the requirements for sleeping area. As part of that variance, you could certainly cap the I mean, you could write it however you so choose, any restrictions.
Just what I'm thinking is down the road, if somebody else took over management of the house and they say, hey, these day rooms, that's an opportunity there. So they've already got the variance for the dormers. And then you've got a room sitting there waiting for 2 or 3 more people to sleep. So in some future scenario, to prevent that future scenario.
Maybe
would
one
you
way
be
to
able
do it would be, and
cap it
certainly
off?
Jan being an architect, it's probably all digitized, for them to submit plans of the current situation. These are the dormers, label the rooms, dormer 1, 2, 3, day room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many day rooms there are, and this condition has to be maintained. And once this condition, I mean, we just had a variance that it was for a group home for, at the time, unwed mothers, was what it was called back then. And it was maintained that way by the Catholic Social Services for years and years and years. But the way the variance was written back in the 70s was that if the use ever changes, then the variance is rescinded. The use changed. So now the variance has been rescinded and they have to do they have to follow the code completely. So you can write it in such a way, but I think the easiest way to verify that is for plans to be attached to the variance that delineate the dormer rooms and the day rooms as they sit now, and say, these have to remain, and whatever your conditions are for the 3 dormers, and how many day rooms are there?
Depends on the scenario.
Okay, and however many day rooms there are.
If you took like the scenario with 14, it's pretty easy to say which ones, the sleep-in rooms and then the day use rooms are delineated with the people who are, if you look, the numbers of people who are in the day room are equal to the number of people that are in the dormers. So there aren't like more people using that day room than are in the dormers.
I guess in a
So
roundabout way of answering
You could
the-
submit something like that would make
Yeah,
it.
but to answer your
pretty
question
clear.
is, you guys can write the variance however you so choose, and put whatever restrictions on there that you would like to see to make you comfortable if you choose to put in a variance. That's just a suggestion on how to, so they don't take what's a dormer room with 130 square feet and say, well, I think I want this one that's 80 square feet be not dormer, I'm sorry, day room. Now I want this much smaller one to be, and then now I can change this and be able to increase, and you can even cap and say no more than X number of people in the house total.
And setting a precedent, if we give them the variance, that's based on all of this information. I don't know that any other organization, whatever their affiliation, could come in here without the same set of circumstances and say, hey, you gave it to them, is my concern. Because I don't think it's setting a precedent because of all the research they've done and because of how safe.
It may not.
Okay.
It does, in that it's part of the record, and someone can always pull this out at a future hearing, whether it's when we're all here or
Right.
10 years from now, and say, look, they did this
And we
way
can see.
back when.
Yeah.
So it does come up where it's pulled out as a precedence.
Okay. But in this case, we could state, because they met this, this, and this, and this, that's why we're granting this. And then, to me, there's something to be said about 80 years of it working. You know, that's where I'm torn too, is that I would not feel comfortable for, maybe 20, 30 square feet where it works for them, but it's always worked, and so far, they've had a pretty safe record. And yes, you can't always determine what's gonna
Right.
happen in the future, but they've done a lot of work to show us that it's a safe way for them to live. And I do think, personally, sharing a room with 7 people gives me an anxiety attack. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
That's why you guys get paid so much to make that decision.
Exactly. That's true.
I have and pardon my ignorance, everybody in the room, life safety, carbon monoxide, is that just off of gas forced air furnaces, or don't you have boilers? Tell me about carbon monoxide.
What you can, there are, with the HVAC systems, they have carbon monoxide detectors, so that what happens is if you don't have enough fresh air, you don't have enough
Fresh air.
oxygen in the room, and I see no reason why that wouldn't be a good idea.
And are those are just something that you put on the wall and they're battery operated and they,
You can use battery,
No.
the ones that you want are the ones that are hooked into your system.
Right.
And again,
That are
that's something,
Right.
instead of,
Mitigation.
because the building code, you can do battery operated, but again, if you wanted
Yeah, I
to.
wouldn't-
to-
I would want
If you want to feel more comfortable, and that was part of it, is to, and then that would be part of the variance from this point forward. So as a rental inspector, when we went out 10 years from now, we'd pull out the variance and say, you still need to meet all these conditions.
and what is the difference between, I'm really sorry down here, with the battery and the hard wire?
Hardwired is permanently, powered as long as there's house power, and sometimes there's battery backup. But it's a notion that, your carbon monoxide detector starts beeping because the battery's worn out and you can't sleep, so you just pull it out and, you don't have a carbon monoxide detector anymore.
So to hardwire that, you have to have an electrician come in and do it?
Correct.
Is that a costly thing?
$100-ish
Well, probably more than that.
for just,
but-
for the electrician. I'm not talking about the device.
Right.
But we're doing some significant work for the mechanical systems that we're adding, so it would just be that dormer 3 that isn't, that has all the windows that would be, that we would need to add.
But are you saying there's currently duct detectors or plans for duct detectors, or are you talking about wired carbon monoxide detectors in the rooms? That-
Where we're putting in the new mechanical system, they can
Mhm.
be incorporated into the mechanical system.
Space, right,
Yes.
but I'm talking about an actual device
In
in
the
the
room.
dormer.
Mhm.
And do you know if the fire alarm system will handle a signal from devices
I
like that?
don't know offhand. I know the smoke detectors because we have the fire suppression system, the smoke detectors are battery operated. They're not hardwired, because that's an option in the code when you have a fire suppression system, they can be battery operated. So we do deal with batteries. Every summer, we change out all the batteries through.
And then we check them at midway through the year.
Mid-break.
When you
Right.
change your clocks.
Yeah. When the girls are gone for Christmas.
When the rugs get cleaned.
Yeah.
So they're not connected either?
They're not, those are not. Yeah.
Jim, I have one more question. So thinking about, you had mentioned kind of the situation where you had a change of use in a building. I think that certainly makes sense to revisit variances, but also putting in some language about like if there's major remodeling or change in square footage. Because again, I guess I was thinking about, if you decided to completely renovate and times change and, you're adding on somehow, try to cover situations that may or may not occur in the future.
That's why I say and I think you've got the plans digitized.
Right.
I'm assuming, if she submits plans and says, this is the way as it sits today, and then you and your variance say, as the building exists today,
Mhm.
we'll allow this. If it changes in any way, then it would have to be, they'd have to put in for another variance.
And one point of reference is, we are a non-conforming use, so, one, we can't add to the building itself, and two, if anyone purchases it, they don't have the land area for the capacity, they would need to get a zoning board of appeals.
The other zoning, they predate the zoning
Gotcha.
ordinance, so they don't have to follow the zoning ordinance.
And then I had a question for you, Jan. Did you go through and run the square footage that each person does have 30 square foot in a dormer and 40 in a day room?
Yes.
Is that consistent for
Yeah, and
every
actually,
situation?
it's a pretty easy check. If you go, we have the areas of the rooms that were measured.
Right.
And then the numbers of
I
of
haven't
people
run
that
all
would
the
be-
math while
yeah,
I'm
no,
sitting here.
Yeah.
But I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure that you did verify that.
Yeah.
Kristen, I'm new to this panel here, so is a variance forever, or do you ever put a time frame on it?
Typically, variances are in perpetuity, unless there is some stipulation on like change of use or what have you.
Are you
And
guys
we
gonna
do pull up variances from the 30s and 40s.
Yep.
Oh, you
Mhm.
seriously?
All right.
Would a hardwired connected fire suppression or fire alarm system be something you'd consider? 'Cause that does concern me that you have a battery-operated system, you have the potential for that many people in one room who wouldn't get a general alarm if the room next to it or below it was on fire.
For the dormers? Yeah, we could.
Well, for the dorm, but then I think, you start thinking, well, it should be the dormers, should be the adjacent rooms, and should be the rooms below, and now you're probably talking the building, correct?
That would be a large expense. I mean, if you wanted to say we wanted the hardwired in the dormers, that would be doable.
Do you ever do it in the hallway or not?
You could, you just can't anticipate where the fire is gonna start. And the idea would be that if you've got that many people in one room, that you'd like to get them out before the room.
But you do have the alarm, I mean, if there is a fire, the alarm goes off when the sprinkler head goes off. And, and that is throughout the house.
Okay.
So that's why they allow the battery-operated smoke detectors, because it's sort of a double coverage in a way.
The minute the smoke hits.
Those are not tied
Yeah,
into
well-
the fire suppression system.
No, they're separate.
Right.
But the.
So there's a flow alarm,
It's a flow
essentially.
alarm, yeah.
So generally, the way a fire suppression system works is there's a little glass bead, and that sprinkler, it's not like one goes off and the whole house goes off. It doesn't go off till it sees enough heat to burst that, and then that sprinkler starts sprinkling. So it's a very good protection system. In some ways, we refer to them as property protection, because you could still have, smoke can kill people too. So even before you get a head going. Now, that does help, if you have an adjacent fire to stop it, but there's still a concern that, that head won't go until you have enough heat underneath that sprinkler to burst
And
that head.
smoke is usually what does kill people in
Correct.
fires,
And
isn't it?
smoke is first, definitely. I think the other thing, if you're thinking about, operationally, we also have an insurance company that requires us, we have to have a safety review that we send into national. We
Mhm.
have an insurance company that requires us to do a safety review, and then we have our maintenance of the, twice a year with the smoke detection system. So there are quite a few checks and balances that require maintenance of those systems.
Right, but not being tied. And we've seen some examples where when somebody, I'm sure this doesn't happen there, but wants to smoke in their room, they remove the battery or remove the head.
And we've had, yeah, I mean, that's why there are no candles, there are no, all those things, yeah.
Not that you girls would do any of that stuff, of course, we would never assume that.
I do room checks.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
I do room checks. I do unscheduled room checks. I take handles if I see them, yes. I mean, yeah.
So now what?
All right, is there any further discussion? Any other questions? Oh, yes.
It is, I'm relatively sure about this, it's only the sleeping rooms that have the battery operated, the hall detectors and so forth are hardwired. I think that's the little exception in the code, and I'm not sure why it exists that way, but.
But then potentially you might be talking lower cost if you can wire a detector in those dorms to the hall detector.
Yeah, and I think we could, for the dormers, I don't have a problem with doing the hardwired detectors in the dormers because they have, again, there's a higher life safety risk. And we can team them up with the carbon monoxide detectors if you'd like.
No,
If anybody wants like additional financial, I know Jan's touched on it, but I run some more numbers. If anybody wants the financial hardship or anything like that, I'm more than happy to share
I
that.
understand, it just, you know, if there's ever loss of life and a board decides nobody will care that, you know, it was $5,000 or $10,000. This would be further kicking the can, which you may not want to do and vote on it today, but I would be comfortable approving something like this if I had a more definitive idea of what could be done in terms of enhanced fire alarm system and carbon monoxide detectors, at least, I'd be happy with carbon monoxide detectors in those rooms, you know, if they were hardwired.
And I think we can work that out. Yeah, that can be a condition.
Right, I think if there was a motion, you could make that a condition of the
Yeah,
variance.
it's done.
Another condition would just be to put some kind of restriction on the maximum number of people sleeping in that house at any given time.
And if we do that, what we'd like is this is the second and the third floor, and then we have our house director's suite, which has the capacity of 2, and then the green room, which is our guest room, which has a capacity of 2. So those are on the first floor.
Now's the time.
So 60.
Get it in there.
64 would be your number,
Correct.
and your comp 64 works with the numbers that you were talking about. So you could
Yeah, if
help
we could
come
go,
from
that would be
64.
very helpful with the 14 in each dormer.
And historically, been able to do that.
And that is actually less than what we had in the dormers and some
Where's this thing? Kristen?
So I've got some notes.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to try and muddle my way through them.
all right.
But remember, when we have a motion, we can certainly make discussions even before it's a second. Okay, so, let's see here. So I'll make a motion to approve the variance request with the maximum housing capacity on the second and third floors of 60 residents, a housing director and guest rooms, which each have 2 for a total of 4 on the first floor. Fix the wording on that. Allowing sleeping in the dormers where there's a minimum of 30 square foot per resident in the dormer and an additional 40 square foot per resident in the day room for a total of 70 square feet. Predicated on having hardwired smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in each of the 3 dormers. Does that cover our
With
concern?
them communicating to each other in the hall.
You want them interconnected, you want them attached to the fire alarm system?
Well, that's what.
So you're going to offer a friendly amendment, go ahead.
Right, well, I have a little bit of difficulty, I don't know what's possible, so writing this up and then you telling us, you know, you can or can't.
Well, I'm looking
do
at the fire alarm report here
Okay,
online.
That's helpful.
And it shows 19 smoke detectors are attached to the system now. So that's kind of what Jan is saying, is that they're probably in the common areas and hallways. There's 1 heat detector in the kitchen.
Okay.
So there are detectors attached to the system now. It's not a manual system where there's only a pull station by the exit
Right,
doors.
okay.
So I would imagine that there is a system device nearby already to those 3 dorms. So if they took, and I don't know what
Right,
coverage
so-
in there, they might have to put, maybe have to put 2 in there, but at least, you know.
Whatever's required, but
Whatever's
those in the
required, they can have
dormers
the fire alarm
tied to the
company come
existing
and detectors
system.
in the 3 dormers.
Right.
Connected to the fire alarm system so
Yes.
that if,
Yeah.
and maybe even add an audio-visual device in those 3 rooms so that if any detector went off in the building, it would alert the occupants of those 3 rooms, as a suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I'm not sure the audio, oh, okay, so a strobe.
A horn strobe, right.
Okay.
Horn strobes in the dormers,
I-
I'm just trying to think. I know we have them in the hallways.
What do you have in the hallways?
The horn strobes are in the hallways and the larger areas. I don't know if they're in the dormers.
We never had a fire drill in the middle of the night, so.
Oh, you can see them in the day.
Yeah, right. You can see them, but I mean, So nobody, I was gonna ask Shannon. if
So nobody's actually
there was
been
a
in the
storm
dormers or
or
anything, right?
whatever.
So connecting the fire alarm to the system, hardwired.
So as opposed to hardwired or hardware interconnected smoke detectors, I think what Jerry's asking for is to actually have the fire alarm system extended into those 3 dormers.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then if the carbon monoxide detector can also be attached to the alarm system, I don't know if that's.
That would
as
be
important to
ideal,
you.
but
You don't
if
wanna
you
put
can't,
it-
as long as it's.
Yeah, you don't want to put that on the fire alarm system.
Right, as
It
long
can
as
show
it's
up as a
up.
trouble or whatever, but
Right.
it's certainly having a carbon monoxide system in there would be.
Right, and a hardwired, meaning powered.
Powered.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
House-powered
ideally
carbon
connected,
monoxide
but
system.
connecting's not a requirement. And if, obviously, if it could be connected to the system, that would make the most sense, but that may not be possible.
So do we need to change the language?
Can you read back?
Can you read that?
Are you kidding? No, I just watched the video. I just have that you motion to approve the request for a maximum of 60 residents for the 2nd and 3rd floor, and plus an additional 4 for the house mother and the guest room, the green room on the lower level. Allowing sleeping in the dormer and day rooms for a total of 70 square feet. Predicated to have smokes hardwired and carbon monoxide detectors added. Jerry amends, he would like the system to extend into the 3 dormers on Jeff's a request, and a carbon monoxide system also.
Is that hardwired, the carbon monoxide?
So what is your, Jerry, what is your recommendation there?
To take me out of the write-up, but
Okay.
that's the first recommendation. But no, beyond that is that, yeah, the 3 dormers are tied into the existing hardwired system.
For both smoke detectors and carbon
For
monoxide?
smoke detectors, now preferably carbon monoxide, but if that's not possible, they can be standalone, hardwired, meaning powered, you know, carbon monoxide detectors.
I second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion or?
Well, we're expecting a plan back from Jan, correct, that confirms the occupancy, because we are limiting occupancy
Right.
or sleeping in some of the day room
And
spaces.
you want to put something in there about that it can't vary from the plans or
Correct.
the use, or the,
Right.
Yes.
Right, right, and if the use changes, that this
that needs to
is
be part of
rescinded.
the.
Right.
Right.
So thank you for that. I'd like to add to that motion that Jan will submit the floor plan and layout, and the variance will be specific to this floor plan and layout. Does that cover it?
And then that gets done by city staff outside of a board meeting, right? So
What do you mean? What do
We
you mean it's
can
done
be-
As far as checking to make sure
we
those.
can wrap our portion
You
of it
got,
up
you got, it's a
today.
wrap.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about it.
It's all Jeff after that.
Do we need to second
Perfect.
the addition?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll second the addition.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay.
Jeff has a point to make.
When are the ladies moving back in?
August 29th.
Can we make sure that these changes are done prior to August 29th? The fire alarm and things like that, whatever changes need to be made that are done before the unit's reoccupied?
Is
I
that,
always first.
that's
No,
the-
no.
And that way you can set up a reinspection date with me, a safety, whatever we want to call it, and I'll come back out, verify all these things have taken place.
Great.
Okay, so another amendment to make sure that all of these items are completed by August 29th prior to the girls moving in. And I'd like not only completed, but that inspection to happen prior to August 29th.
I second the additional addition.
Thank you. All right. So time frame. That should cover it. Sorry, this is a really messy one.
It is.
I'll figure it out. It's okay.
And there's, I mean, take a few minutes.
Yeah, I guess I just want to, like,
So you've got number of people, you've got timeframe.
Right.
You've got the additional safety features in the rooms. We've got if the use changes, then the variance has to be reviewed or,
We did not add change of use.
right.
We just added change of layout, I think.
Right.
Do we need to say anything about personal property or how wide the
Oh,
walkway needs to
maintain the aisle.
maintain the
space.
aisle for safety or for, we don't need to say
You can
anything?
put whatever requirements you
What is
wanna
the
put in there.
requirement?
The housing requirement is only 27 inches. It's
Oh,
it's
Okay,
it's
you
based
have
on
more
code
than
from the
that,
60s.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
more than that, right?
And
Okay.
can we say based on the plan submitted at the
Yeah,
meeting?
I think
So we
we
can
should
say,
do that.
you know, based on this
You could
document?
have them submit a layout plan, and they would have to keep it to that plan.
Yeah.
They do kind of move the bunks around a little bit. I think if we're maintaining the 27 inches or whatever you want to say, maintain, so on, I prefer that rather than to actually have a plan and say, each bunk has to be in this location.
Okay, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't have a problem maintaining a certain clearance, it's just, submitting a plan with furniture layout.
Yeah, the 27, they would have to maintain no matter what, because that's what the code is without a variance. So if there's anything
Oh.
above and beyond that that you guys would feel more comfortable with to vote on,
So the 27's already,
it's in our code.
okay.
Plus, once this happens, they're gonna move their stuff around regardless, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just if they get inspected. I mean, it is a sorority house after all.
It is.
Okay.
I'm curious, do these doors have to be fire suppression doors that go into that dorm room or not? Or they just can be regular doors?
20-minute fire doors
20, and
for a corridor.
and are they?
That's all that's required in any of the buildings.
Oh, good.
If it's a stairway door, it has to be a C-label 1-hour door.
And they meet code now? Awesome.
And like, I said, this is something that was only brought up because of a parent complaint. It's a very well-run organization. We have not had issues with them in the past.
I was very impressed at how well it was run during the visit.
I think it's a wrap.
All right.
We could
Well,
require the addition of karaoke if you'd like.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. Is there any further discussion or additions to the motions? Okay, then, all in favor of the variance approval, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, variance is granted.
Here we go.
4 months later.
Are we done?
Oh, yeah, we're not.
Please have
Oh,
someone
yeah,
call.
sorry, let's finish up with our agenda. Sorry. Here we go.
Because they're booking me in August already.
Any unfinished business? Not aware of any?
Huh?
Any new business?
Okay, great.
Our-
our absence in some of the meetings, so that you're not caught.
You're not related to Carrie.
Right, and we did decide that we still had a
Oh,
quorum
really?
on,
Wow, he was my
July
filmmaker.
and August.
One more than
You're gonna have
50%,
four
so
people.
as long as you got 4 people, you got a quorum.
1978 or 79.
Because you're not gonna be here.
How's he
You're
doing?
leaving in July. You're not gonna be
Yeah?
here next
Next month, correct, I will not be here
Well,
in
give him
July.
my regards.
All right, just little new business, we were just discussing summer schedules.
Oh, we do? Sorry.
We just wanted to make sure that, so I won't be here in July.
I won't be here in July or August.
Okay,
and I won't be here in August.
So no August, it looks like.
so anyone else that
Oh, wait.
can't make,
You'll be here in August.
I'll be here in
Okay,
August.
so, okay.
unless I get
The
better.
dates in July and August.
So what,
Just wanted to make sure we had a quorum.
What are the dates in July and August?
July,
second Tuesday.
Second
Well-
Second
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The 13th.
July
The 4th is,
4th?
it's the 12th.
Tuesday?
Or 11th, it's because the 4th is a Tuesday.
So July 11th.
What did you just say?
It would be July 11th, because 4th of July is a Tuesday.
I have 2 or 3 that are waiting in the wings, but they're not 100%, so.
There may not be a July meeting.
they may not.
Any more frat houses?
No, we
No.
got another good one
Those
coming
are
now.
action packed.
Got another one coming up.
No.
Another good one, not a fraternity, but
No, I like, remember the
Okay.
infraction
So
factory
if
from
your
the
schedule
last time.
changes and you know that you won't make it for the July meeting, I think
Need to know.
let
Email
Ann know
Ann,
as soon as
email Ann right
possible.
away, okay.
Okay,
Um,
in
we'll
which
determine
case
whether-
you kick the can down the road a month?
Yep.
and-
Right, so,
Okay.
yeah, if there's not 4 of us, we can't have
Right.
we won't
Gotcha.
have a quorum. Okay. All
Well,
right.
as far as I know, I'm gonna be here, so I don't get to take vacation this year. so.
All right.
Sorry to hear that.
Then I would
Yeah, no kidding. It's
entertain a
terrible.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
No, you have to.
Oh,
So
so I thought you were making it.
I move.
Okay, now I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting
Thank you
adjourned.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
much.